All right, welcome guys to the 2019 drumming circle. Just as a raise of hands, how many is this like your first drumming circle you've ever been to? Look around. All right, there you go. Okay. Well, welcome to the drumming circle. You got to see that's the drumming of the village right there, which actually is the best we've ever had. So I heard Sue I heard her saying that the first drumming circle we didn't have any drums, so we encouraged people to bring pots and pans, and so the first one was us just and plastic bags. Yes, it was noisy. Yes, people, it was a noisy drumming circle. So here, let me just kind of give you the layout for what to expect at the drumming circle. I'm going to talk for a little bit, and then you're going to hear people come up on a panel and talk about some volunteering and what their experience in volunteering is. And then we are going to have some people come up and talk about what God has done in their life over the last year in the village. And depending on how long all of that takes, we may even give you guys some opportunity to stand up and talk about what God has done. And then we're going to have Corey's going to come up and talk to us a little bit. And then we're going to break out into groups and do some conversation in groups. And that's going to kind of be the drumming circle for you. So I will preface the first part is what we're going to do, the financial talk. And I'll say if you have questions about the finances outside of what I present, so that our meeting does not become a financial meeting, you could come and sit and talk to me and to Rod and the other elders. And if you've got questions or you say that doesn't make sense, can you make that clear to me? We'll do that. But we don't really want to do that in the whole group meeting today. So we're just going to it should say, here's the state of the family, because drumming circles are family meetings. So here's the state of the family, and here's how you can engage, and here's the things that we should celebrate that God has done. So that's how we're going to do it. So I will start with the beginning of our financial report, which so January 1st to August 31st, our total giving has been $105,526, right? So in the sixth grade, I don't know how many of you were sixth grade. Anybody sixth grade teachers in here? Anybody sixth grade teachers? Yes, but not math. Well, in my sixth grade, in math, you've taught math too in sixth grade? Oh, well, there you go. Well, I hated it in sixth grade because they made me read numbers, and I was just horrible at it. But anyway, from last year, that means from January 1st to August 31st, our giving has increased $9,558 over last year. That's a celebration. So yes, please clap. Very good. Now, our total expenses this year have been $115,932, which is a net income of negative $10,406. Oh, very good. So that's the state. Now you might say, well, why would that be? Because if you've been at the village for any length of time, you kind of know our basic budget is the same, and it just sort of rhythmically goes along. And because our church increases very slowly in people, so we've just slowly grown, our budget has just kind of slowly grown in how we operate, and we kind of are in rhythms. So there's usually not that much of a difference. But here is the answer to the question why. In May, so here are the four reasons. Salaries, food, because you eat too much, the amount of money collectively that our church has given to outside organizations, and the utilities. So let me walk through these. Approximately, and you see those are zeros because I did a little bit of rounding just so that it make it kind of clear to you. Salaries. Mark came on full-time in May. And on top of that, we increased Jessica, my admin person, another 5 hours a week. And we brought Susan on for 5 hours a week to kind of organize Mark, because that's a problem, and all the music things. So that increased our expenses there at $14,000. Now, food. We now cook 2 meals every Sunday. And those meals have had to get bigger and bigger. In fact, I think I just increased the budget from 125 for people or 120 or 100 to 125 in reimbursement because we're just more and more people are showing up, except last Sunday night, which, by the way, was absolutely amazing in some ways. It was the first Vesper service I think I've ever been at where there were no children. There were absolutely no kids in kid vespers and no kids in the nursery. it was the most remarkable thing. Was there one kid? There was one mid kid, and he was cooking. So he was working hard in the kitchen for us. So that has increased about $3,000. Giving wise, our church gives to just 2 places. Well, now we've increased it. So we go to 3 places. We give to Ben and Christy, who are our primary missionaries at the village in Turkey. And we started doing that. We hadn't even started doing that full time last year. So we picked that up. Plus, we give to Interfaith, which is an organization that we staff their food pantry. Some of the people who would normally be here are staffing the food pantry right now. So they're missing the drumming circle to do that. So we give to Interfaith, and they are a group of we are a group of churches that help people pay for their rent, help people who are trying to get paperwork done, like driver's license and all that kinds of things. Where when it's difficult for you to do, they assist you in a whole bunch of things, and we give to that. And also, if you didn't know, we are loosely affiliated with the Christian Reformed Church because Rod here and I are both ordained in the Christian Reformed Church. So there are a group of churches in Arizona and Texas that come together twice a year and try to do things together, or at least argue about it. And so, and try to figure out who they are. And so though we don't belong to them, they have been so gracious to us, and we have begun to sort of support that process in there. So that's kind of why our giving has gone up there. And then if you didn't, the building has started to be used a lot more. And so in May and June and July and August, our electric bill doubled. Okay, so it went from usually in the summer it's about $400 and something. It was $800 in July, and the bill in July was for June because we had a makers camp that ran the air conditioning nonstop for a week, which is hard in this building because it's not insulated. You might just walk by the doors and notice that there are like huge cracks. So the reason that it's been a cool summer in Arizona is because we've been air conditioning in Tucson. So that's kind of part of the issue. But so it's increased about $1,000, give or take. So there is why, okay, that happened. Now, you might ask, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to do 3 things as a community. This is what, as your elders and pastor is saying, we're going to celebrate what God's done, we're going to pray, and we're going to trust God. Okay? And here's how that's going to work. Number 1, we're going to celebrate because villagers' giving is up $9,558. We gave $10,203 to outside things. Now, here's how that works. I said it was up $2,000. Well, there's another part of giving that the village does. Lots and lots of people call us, and people in here, we're all in different financial places. So the village supports you guys paying rent, doing things like that, and we also pay for gas for people. We help people with groceries. We help people with rent that don't even belong to our community, things like that. So we're giving money out that way. So that's a thing to celebrate. We as a community are giving our resources to people outside of our community. Last year, we were $7,785 in the black, okay? So that's what we're celebrating. And our balance in our budget, our bank account as of August 31st is $42,269. Right? So we have money in the bank, and we have never, ever, ever ended in the red in 18 years. And we get musical celebration for that. So these are things to celebrate. God is doing things in our community financially. So what are we going to pray for as a community? We're going to thank God for his provision because he has continued to provide. And we are going to ask that he would continue to provide. That's what we're going to do. We're going to submit ourselves to God and say, you've provided for us. We're doing your work. You're in charge of our finances. Please continue to provide. That's the prayer I invite all of you to pray. Okay? Now, the third thing is we're going to trust God with our giving. And that means you guys. We're inviting you to trust God with your finances and what he might be asking you to do to help support God's mission at the village. So we're inviting you, as you look at the financial things, to trust God in what he might be asking you to do sacrificially. If you notice, if you're at the village for any length of time, we don't talk about giving. The only talk you get is the basket goes around and we say, hey, if you're a villager, this is your community, you should support it. That's an invitation from Jesus in response to his word. That's all we say about giving. And then at the drumming circle, we say, hey, this is something you should think about. So you're going to trust God with that. And then we're going to trust God with our community's finances. And a lot of that has to do with we're all going to trust God with my salary. I'm going to trust God that he's going to provide. We're going to trust that we hired Mark full time and that God will provide, that he's going to provide for the building, he's going to provide for the ministry we're doing, all those kinds of things. So that's the three things. We're going to celebrate, we're going to pray, and we're going to trust God. That's where we're at financially. Now, I know some of you are like number crunchers and you're trying to figure out the numbers, you're writing those down, or you don't, and some of you are like, I don't care, whatever. Sounds good. If you want to sit with me and say, hey, can we work that out and figure those things out so I can better understand? I would love to talk to you. But what happens is that when we have that conversation, and we usually don't at running circles, we could get caught up in the minutia of all of that, and it's just not helpful. Yes?
We also sit down with you and just say, I really want to give, but I don't really know how to work in tithing in my life, and can you help me with my budget, set up auto donation through the pray.com app. Would you be willing to coach?
Sure. I would be willing to do that. And I think, the question was, would you sit with us and help us with our budget and show us how to use pray.com's giving app or something like that? Yes, you can give lots of different electronic ways. You can, some people at the village deposit it straight into the village bank account. So there's lots of different ways to do that. If you want to know how to do it, Emily McConnell just raised her hand. She does that. She can help you get that done. There's a link on the website, too, to go to Just Give. Also is another group that we use. So that's our finances. That's where we're at. That's kind of the situation of the village. So I want to read to you and just do a little bit of talking about the village. And I want to read to you Isaiah 61, because at the village, if you've been here any length of time, the prophet Isaiah, and in particular chapter 61, is my favorite verse, and it's my favorite passage. And I feel like it describes sort of the mission and the essence of who the village is and where we're going and how we think about things. And so I'm going to try to offer you the details of who we are in the context of Isaiah 61. So let me read it to you. It says, the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me. And I want you to just for a moment understand that in Luke chapter 4, Jesus reads this particular passage and says, in your hearing, this has been fulfilled. Okay? And so one of the unique things about that is because Hebrew people had so much of the scripts of Scripture memorized that he didn't even have to read all of it for them to assume he was saying that entire passage has been fulfilled. Now, there's different kinds of thinking about that, but Jesus says what Isaiah is writing about himself is actually being written about me. And he says, so the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me. Now, I want to pause again and say, the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord now, because of what Christ did on the cross and the resurrection and the giving of God's Spirit to us, the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is also on you if you embrace Jesus. He's in you and on you. And here is what I would argue is in you and on you to do. Because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim the good news to the poor. Now, proclaiming here is the actual word in Hebrew is to accost. Okay? So to accost, people with the good news to the poor. Now, this good news is actually a meal thing. It's not like good news, hey, you're going to accost people, you're going to them and you're saying, hey, there's a gigantic dinner, I know you're starving. Hey, you need counseling. I have a counselor. Like this poverty is not just a financial poverty. In fact, the Hebrew word is a all-encompassing poverty. Right? So we are So what Jesus is saying you and I are called to do is accost people in their poverty and say, there is something good for you. And he says, he has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted. So that's to tie up people whose hearts are broken, to proclaim freedom, and there's that proclaim again, to accost, freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn. And in order to comfort somebody, you have to have had comfort. Like you know this, like you don't know how to comfort anybody if you've never been comforted. And Paul in Corinthians says very clear that God is the one who comforts us. So the invitation here is that we would be people who have the comfort of God, who then comfort all who mourn, and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. So the picture here that Isaiah is kind of drawing, that Jesus picks up on and that you and I are invited into, is that there is a state of humanity, and that is a state of grieving and mourning and brokenness. And we can see this, economically, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, mentally. There's this brokenness, which causes mourning and grieving. And this is in the Hebrew community is a picture, or is how you act. When something bad happens, you change. You don't put any smelly oils on you. You put ashes on your head. You make it very obvious that you're grieving, right? That is the state of all of us, and that is the state of the world. But as we meet Jesus, we are invited into this process with him, right? We are invited into this process to give people the oil of joy, to comfort people who mourn, to give people the garment of praise. And this is just a picture of people changing people's clothes, right? You're moving out of mourning into actual celebration. And so that's the invitation. Now, it says that they will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for his display of his splendor. And I've said this before, and Kevin kind of mentioned it in his sermon, but when you think about being planted as an oak takes a very long time to grow, and it is a very sturdy tree. And so part of when you begin to invite all of us into something bigger, into a place with Jesus, we're inviting us to plant ourselves into Christ and become oaks that shade people. But that takes a really, really long time. It's a long process. You don't get to be an oak overnight. And sometimes it's discouraging. But that's the invitation, because you and I think at the Village, we long to be people who can shelter one another with the love of Christ and build back what was broken. Right? That's what we are called to. So in the context of all of that, I want to talk about community, because if you didn't know, the Village is a value-driven church, and we have 6 values. We have community, truth, accessibility, authenticity, creativity, and the disciplines. These are our values. And so everything we do, we try to run through them to understand things. Now, if you're really curious about how the Village believes, what we believe about that, you can go on to the Village website, or you can just simply type in the Village Church values, and there are hundreds of sermons that we've preached on values at the Village. We did an entire year on the values of the Village. We did a Bible study on the values of the Village. The only value I want to talk about today is community. Because what you hear in the world and in church is that we really need community, right? And community is the best thing for people, and people need one another. But what you find out is that if you try to operate a community like Isaiah 61, it's not as romantic as reading Isaiah 61. Because that means that you will be with brokenhearted people. That means you will be with people who are living in their poverty. That would be all of us, right? You are going to be in and interacting with people who are grieving and mourning and suffering, right? And so when you get together in community like that, what happens is it's like sandpaper on flesh, right? You are being refined, but it tears you up, right? It's not necessarily pretty. So here's what I would say about Village Community. It is amazing. And you will taste things you've never tasted before. And you will be angry like you've never been before. And you will be hurt like you've never been before. And you will be disappointed in your leaders like you've never been before. Because you are experiencing real community. And if that isn't true at the Village for you, then you're not experiencing community. Because community in that mess has moments of joy and incredible things, but it is a painful process to be shaped into holiness and the likeness of God and to be healed. So I want to give you the hard understanding of what the Village is about and where we're headed, and tell you what the reality is, okay, of what this all is. Now, how does it work at the Village? Well, if you didn't know, when you join the Village, meaning we do this at a belonging service every single year, and the reason that we do this, and I'll talk about it a little bit, is because we want you to rethink, because that's a messy thing we're inviting you into. So we want you to rethink if you want to actually be part of it. But if you join the Village, or if you reaffirm your membership, we call you a minister, right? So we rename your identity. We say you are a minister of Jesus. We put on you the reality of what Scripture says you are. You are a servant of the King, right? And so you are called to serve both this community and the world around you. And we name that on you. But in our leadership structure, we have two groups. One, we have lead ministers. And lead ministers are people who are leading the servants. They are lead servants. They're out leading groups. They're encouraging, empowering. They're out among the people. They're doing those kinds of things. And we have elders. Elders' job are to equip people, to teach people, to pray, to do lots and lots of praying, desperate praying over the people, to lead people out into the world, to help people think about what the vision is and how they might bring it to bear in the world around them. So you might ask, well, how does anyone get into these structures? Well, you know how you get into the top structure. You join the church. The second structure, you can get into lead ministry real simple. You get asked or you ask. Now, if you ask to be a lead minister, the elders, who are the ones who are going to decide that, may say, sure, come be a lead minister. Or they might say, not right now. Here's the process that we'd like you to walk through to get there. And then, yes, you can come. How do you become an elder? Same thing. You come to the elders and say, I think I should be an elder. And the elders say, yeah, we think you should be an elder too. You've been eldering. We've been thinking about that. Or we say, not yet, but here is some ways that we see that you could step into that. And I ask you to do stuff. So that's how our leadership structure works. At this point, lead ministers meet once a month with the elders. The elders meet once a month to pray, and at times we're meeting every single week. Other times, when we just can't meet every single week, we're not. That's how that works. It goes in waves. So that's how that works. Now, I want to talk about belonging, and I want to talk about the covenant of our church. And in fact, so at the Village, we have kind of these two ways of walking in our community. One, you might come to the place where you come here and you're like, I like the Village. The Village is cool. I like the way they talk about things and they feed me. But I'm not so cool with Jesus, or I'm not so cool with all their beliefs. I don't think I can sign on to this, but I want to belong here. I want this to be my church. Then you, along with everybody else, can do the art project that year and say, I belong to this church this year. Right? So we've done tiles, we've done crazy things like that. We all designed letters. I mean, with the tree. I mean, there's 18 different ones. I don't even know what they all are anymore. Get tired of collecting them, and I don't know what to do with them. Anyway. Yeah, we might, maybe at 20 years, we'll just burn half of them. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, but you may say like, oh, wow, I really like the Village. And not only like the Village, I want this to be my church, and I agree with what they have to say. And so you sign the covenant. The covenant does have a statement of belief. If you're interested in what the statement of belief is, it's sitting out in the entryway, and you can read it over. But what I'd like to do is, for the full impact of membership at the Village, and we've actually never done this in the 18 years. I'm going to read the covenant out loud so that you can hear someone read what you might be committing to. And I hope it disrupts you a little bit. So here is what the leaders, I'm not going to read all the verses. This is also out there. You can find the references. But I'm just going to read the 10 things that the leaders commit and then what we all commit to if you decide to belong in October. We, these are your leaders, commit ourselves to lovingly care for you and seek your growth in Christ. We covenant to provide teaching, preaching, and counsel from the Scripture. We commit that the teaching will span the whole counsel of God's Word. We commit to help you in times of need. We covenant that your elders and lead ministers will meet the criteria assigned them in the Scriptures. We covenant to pray for you regularly, particularly when you are sick. We covenant to exercise church discipline when necessary. We covenant to help you become equipped to serve Christ. We covenant to seek God's will for our church community to the best of our ability as we study the Scriptures and follow the Spirit. We covenant to set an example and join you in fulfilling the duties of belonging. Every time I read that, I think I want to quit. Okay, because that's a lot to say I want to do and be committed to doing. This is what you are signing as a community. I have read and understood both the Apostles' Creed and the Village Statement of Belief and agree not to be divisive to its teaching. I also understand the importance of submission to the church leadership and will be diligent to preserve unity and peace. I will endeavor to maintain a close relationship with Jesus. My journey in Christ will be evident through my regular participation in corporate worship services and involvement in other small gatherings. I will strive to properly manage the resources God has given me, including my time, body, gifts, talents, attitudes, finances, and possessions. This includes regular giving to Village that is sacrificial and cheerful. I commit myself to the Village Church family and agree to aid in fulfilling its missional purpose of healing the city one person at a time. I commit to using the spiritual gifts God has given me for building up the church both at the Village and universally. I covenant to practice the humility and sacrificial attitude of Christ by considering the needs of others. I covenant to have friendly Christian relationships with brothers and sisters in Christ from other churches, but I will not function in leadership or belong to another church family. I covenant to follow the biblical procedure of church discipline and submit myself to discipline if this need should ever arise. I covenant to submit to the authoritative voice of Scripture. So, that's kind of heavy. But that is why we don't say sign it once. Because one year you might be like, yeah, that sounds great. I want to do that. And then after that, you're like, no, I don't want to do that. And maybe I'm not ready to do that. That's why we want to give you every year an opportunity to think that process through and say, okay, is this my space? Do I want to commit to those things? So, that's how you belong to our community. That is the covenant. Here are two very exciting things to happen in the fall in our church. Soup Supper and Fallow Month. Soup Supper is all of us getting together. I don't know how we're going to do it this year, but there's going to be a lot of us. But all of us bring soup, desserts, and bread. We push all the chairs out, and we put tables all through here, and there's Legos everywhere and candles, and we think if the church is going to burn down because the kids are playing with candles. It's kind of scary, but it's just soup everywhere, right? And it's beautiful. And you can bring your friends, and it's just this great celebration of the fall and getting ready just to enjoy cool weather. And the soup is amazing, and really there is no champion when it comes to the soup of the Village, except for Rod. It is always the first Saturday, or the Saturday before Thanksgiving. So it's the 23rd this year, I guess. So, now, probably you've never been to a church or heard of a church that has a thing called Fallow Month. Fallow Month is all of December. We shut down the church in December. The only thing that happens in December is a morning service and an evening service. All of our pilgrim groups shut down. All of our monastic communities shut down. We ask that there be nothing. Prayer groups, game night, everything is shut down. And we ask that you take those moments when we give you space to rest. Now, fallow is what you do to a field. You let it lay fallow so that you can replant in it. So you leave it that way for a year, usually every 7 years. And then it gets its nutrients back, and then you can plant in it. And so we think, because December's crazy for most people, and because our leaders actually need a break, to just kind of spend time with God, calm down, be with their family, those kinds of things, and so do you, that we invite you into that. But what we ask is that in those moments when you would be doing something for the village, that you either rest or you say, hey, I'd love to have this guy over. I've never had him over. I'd love to have these people over. I'd love to go out for coffee. I'd like to go celebrate with some people at the village. We ask you to say, you know what, I haven't talked to my neighbors. I'm going to have them over for dinner. So I ask you to take that space in December and invite people into the richness of your life, or invade other people's richness of their life, right? So these are two really important things that happen in our community. Now, last year we started something called the Living Room Talks. It was packed out in here, and there were like 6 talks, and it was amazing. Jeff was hilarious, right? And it was so informative, and all the different things that we heard. We're going to do the Living Room Talks again this year in February, and we're going to up the ante in the way that we're advertising and doing that kind of stuff. And we're going to have tickets, and you'll get more details probably in October when we kind of launch the promotion of all of this. But here's the talks. The talks are lined up. So number 1, Kathy is going to talk about medical stuff. Maybe wounds and things you should know about life and all that kind of stuff when it comes to medical things. Talk to her a little bit. Maybe it'll just be all the medical calls I've gotten over the 18 years at the village for advice and what you should know. Who knows what that's going to be? The other one is going to get Ruben is going to open us up with my adventure as a fisherman in Alaska. So and then John raised his hand, is going to talk to us about my life as a professional gamer. And then we're going to hopefully, video gamer. And have, I think we may have a little middle school panel of gamers. So we can all get game, updated, and we'll learn some stuff. So let's see, I got that. Then Bob is going to talk to us about living our lives financially, what we should think about. So let me see if I get that. Kathy, and then Steve is going to do a presentation on from life to death, right? Or death to life? What's the name of that? What's the name? The Door, yes, The Door. So it's going to be a presentation through art. So those are the things this year that we're going to have as the Living Room Talks. The Living Room Talks are kind of a homier version of the TED Talks, right? And hopefully we're going to do a little bit different kind of videoing than we did last time. So those are all, it's in February. We have not nailed down the date of 2020. It's the 2020 Talks, yes. So that's me done talking. And so what we're going to talk about here is volunteering. And so I invited some people to come talk about volunteering. And so Treatsia's going to come up. Hannah's going to come up. Albert's coming up. Kelsey is coming up. You can all come up at the same time. It's going to be a panel. All right. Figure it's easier all to talk together than it is to see. We got, nursery, kid vespers, cleaning. Oh, Susan, nursery. There we go. All righty. Yeah, I think that's enough, right? Or, you want to be in the middle end? Okay.
Do you want to take any pictures?
I don't think we need a chair. Does somebody want to take pictures? All right, okay. Adrian, here you go. Here's the camera. All right, where's the mic? All right, so I want you to give everybody your name first and where you primarily volunteer in. And you can and then just pass it on down the line.
Okay.
Start with you, Albert.
My name's Albert Dennis, and I volunteer in cleaning.
Give the man a hand.
My name is Hannah Yakeley, and I volunteer in Kids Vespers.
I'm Tricia Williams, and I volunteer with the MidKids.
I'm Sue Seepin, and I volunteer everywhere but cooking. I have never cooked. Yeah. But I'm going to be talking about nursery.
Hi, I'm Kelsey. I do all the cooking that Sue doesn't do.
Thank you.
All right, so we can just work our way back that way. So here, I sent you these questions, but I'll let you you can answer the first one. What is one of the things you've learned that might be helpful for someone else who's new to this particular volunteering, like cooking, nursery, that kind of thing?
Oh, well, I mean, I think the most important thing about cooking is to kind of plan it out beforehand. Sort of have an idea before you go to the grocery store of what you're going to want to get. Maybe look at the advertisements to see, what kind of meat is inexpensive right now. And also to be willing to poll people when, you're out there, frantically trying to cut up everything and get it all cooked. Be willing to go and say, hey, I need help. Can you help me? And, just grab anybody who happens to be walking through the kitchen. So, when people around here are great, they'll say, yeah, sure. If you need help, I will help you. So that's important. She asked, how do you know how much to buy for the group? Eric's recommendation has been to buy 1/4 to 1/3 pound of raw meat for each person. So that usually comes out to 15 to 20 pounds. And another thing that you can do is look up online, mashed potatoes for a crowd, or things like that. And you can find all kinds of recipes online that give you the amounts that you need. So.
All right. Just move the mic on down.
Oh.
Yeah, we can
We're not going through all the questions yet.
No.
What was the question?
What should helpful things for people?
What do people need to know? Okay, about nursery, poop happens. You're not with them long, but somebody's going to poop. So change the diaper. And if there's 2 people in the nursery, one of them should take the diaper all the way out to the dumpster immediately. That's my advice. You don't always have to change the diaper. If there's a list that says if the parent would prefer to change the diaper themselves, then go have somebody go get the parent.
Text.
Text. Oh, text the parent. I've never seen the list.
It's new.
It's new. Okay, there's a new list. Check the list, text the parent, and if they're good with you changing the diaper, change the diaper. But take it out fast. Poop happens.
So working with MidKids is a little bit different from...
Fortunately.
So, yes.
Can you tell them MidKids is what age? Just
so
9 to 12.
these kids are 9 to 12 years old, and they're right at the cusp right there of believing what a grown-up says. And that's really critical. So, and also they are at that age where they're pushing of the envelope, which is what all kids do, pushing to see where the boundaries are. It looks different. It's really not little kids anymore. And so what has helped me is 2 things. One, I really always start out setting the boundaries. I let them know that the other option to being with me is to be sitting with their parents. And that I expect them to participate. Now, they really respond well to inducement. And so I have this little box that lives in Eric's office because Well, for several reasons. Would you mind holding this? Thank you. And in here is the inducement. Okay, Skittles. So I have this little, these little cupcake holders because they're inexpensive and there's not a huge waste, right? I'm a little conscious of that. And I have one of these for each of the kids that is there. So I pull out as many as I need. And when I needed to learn their names, I would write their name on the outside and then set them up in the circle that the kids are sitting, so that would help me remember the kids' names. And every now and then, I would add one Skittle to each of the little cups. And I would explain this to the children, and I will also explain to them that if I look up and they are disrupting, like niggling their friend or, just causing trouble, I will eat one of their Skittles. With great delight, because those Skittles taste better than regular Skittles. Kathy's Skittle is orange, and it tastes so good. Kathy, I'm so sorry you can't have that Skittle. And it works. I've had to do that only a couple of times, really. The other thing is, Mark makes worksheets, and they are ever evolving because as the children change, the worksheets need to change. And so what happens is we try to keep them engaged in the sermon topic from the previous week. And when I need to read scripture, I try to find the easiest translation possible, because the NIV, guys, is listed at 8th grade reading level, okay? But when you add in all the words that are not commonly used, like covenant, it becomes, post-secondary reading level. So I found, sometimes I'm loud and sometimes I'm not. I'm really sorry, guys. I found this Bible. It is the New International Reader's Version. You can find that if you go to BibleGateway.com. They have that version on there. It is 3rd grade reading level. All the sentences are broken up, and all the big words are explained almost as if you're talking to a person whose second language is English. So if you have to explain, difficult concepts, having the language be really easy helps a lot. It's New International Reader's Version, and I would really like it not to have this baby picture on the front. So
Tamaki makes good book covers. Okay, so Kids Vespers, I'd say first would just be a belief shift that has helped me. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that can hear this lie that somebody is going to be doing this better than me. And so to really reject that and know I have something really good to offer, and then to just step into it, that's been helpful for me. I did Kids Vespers. That's where I liked to volunteer even before I had kids, actually. So before kids and after kids, you can still hear that. And so anyways, to just step in and know that God has me there or you there has been really helpful. And then, let's see, a couple things come to my mind. It's really helpful for me to pause before we enter into the kids' room, kind of in the hallway, and I'll take a breath with the kids and just to calm them before we go in and let them know I'm in charge. And so that's really helpful. It's really helpful to keep moving. Like, we do a lot when there's the awkward pause, all of a sudden we're like, and it's Simon says or Hannah says. Like, you just make up something quick and you do it for 2 minutes, and it just helps their little brains and bodies be ready to do something else. And honestly, just having fun, like really wanting to be there. It's a mental shift. Sometimes I know I'm probably not the only one that's like, oh, I'm on the volunteer list this week. But to shift out of that and go, like, ugh. But then to go, wait, no, like I get to go be with these little people and meet with Jesus with them, and God meets me every time. So to really remember that God has something for me in it. So, yeah. Oh, and to not be afraid to let them know, like what you said at the beginning, that they can go back and be with their parents, like nip in bud. And then you realize you didn't? Okay, Simon says, let's regroup and nip in bud.
All right, so I'd probably say the number one tip, when in doubt, check the checklist if you're cleaning. There could be things that you might forget that are on there, and typically it's hanging up in the kitchen and some like little wedge thing on the wall. That's typically where you can find it. Some things that maybe people might forget, checking the coffee beans. You know, I found them in there. They can be, you know, kind of old, and you should probably remember to change them out. Yeah, the filters. Yeah, you just kind of forget to check that. So check the filters. Another thing to check that people might forget is what was mentioned earlier about diapers. Check the nursery. I found some pretty stink diapers in there a couple times. So there's a trash can in there you probably want to change out. Other things that you might forget are like there's that little library room outside of the village. I think people might forget to go clean that. Some other things I've had problems with sometimes is like communicating with people. Like Jessica will send out a text to say, hey, you're cleaning with so-and-so. So just try to make a little bit of effort to coordinate and get up with that person. And that's actually something I kind of enjoy doing cleaning, is you kind of get to like meet new people and coordinate that. And then one last thing, and this is probably pertaining more to me than everybody else, but in the military, I cleaned a lot, actually. You know, wax the floor, strip it, wax the floor again. And it was a lot of, like, super heavy chemicals. And then when I started cleaning here, I was like, where's all the, like, cleaning stuff for the floor? I couldn't find it. And so I learned eventually that, like, vinegar works pretty well for, like, you know, mopping. So just pro tip, if you didn't know that, you could use vinegar. But yeah, I think that's all I got for cleaning.
Can you offer just like maybe one thing you've learned as you volunteered in this one particular place from God, like where God has met you in that? Is it, or if that's something you can articulate?
Okay, I'll try. I think cleaning, at least for me, I'm a pretty introverted person, so I like talking to people one-on-one. Once it's like 2 or 3, I get pretty anxious and start, drifting. But anyways, cleaning was like kind of like an easy thing for me to go, and it's kind of quiet, and you're typically working with, you know, one other person. So, I totally forgot the question. What was the question?
That's a great answer. God introduces you to people. I think that's a...
How God meets. Oh, yeah. And then I like trying to pursue selflessness. And so cleaning is kind of one of those things. It's like you kind of don't know who cleaned the building unless you're paying attention. So it's kind of like a very selfless thing. There's not like a reward for me, really. People don't know that I clean. So I kind of like trying to find stuff like that where we're not trying to look for some kind of reward, you know, just being selfless. So.
Thank you.
God has met me with the kids. Kids really bring me into the moment and to be really present. And so I just feel like Jesus meets me with them. And we do something called rock prayers, where it's just a tangible way to pray, where we like throw our prayers in the bucket. And I pray in kid verbiage, but what's really on my heart, what I'm really worried about, and the fears I'm having. And so I think God meets me in that simple way, in the way that Jesus says. I think working in Kids Vespers has helped me like press in a little bit more to that the kingdom of heaven belongs to the kids, you know? So I think just in those simple ways, because sometimes I'm like, I really want to hear the sermon, but Jesus meets me in giving my fears. And the Jesus Storybook Bible is amazing. You hear the gospel in every story you read. So my heart's often renewed. And if you take the time to read, I just want to say this in the prep, there's a note that's just for the teachers. And that's like a mini sermon and whenever Steve and I do it, we're like, ooh, that's what Jesus wanted to speak to us. So that's another way Jesus meets me.
So in mid-kids, because you're going over the last week's sermon again, it really gives you a chance to really wrestle on a much deeper level with what the sermon held, what it was that God had to say through that passage. Because when you're teaching something to someone else and you have to explain it, you gain a deeper understanding. That's really true with everything. I see a tutor nod. And also, I have had it happen on more than one occasion where God ended up pointing out to me, okay, did you see what this kid did there? Okay, this is you when I'm trying to talk to you. And so these kids also will hold up the mirror on God's behalf.
Eric, is this the last question? Okay, I'm going to consolidate then. Okay, so let's see. I think along the lines of what Hannah said, I believe that God meets us in the present moment, and working with babies is a place to really throw the agenda, whatever agenda I have in my life or my brain that day, out the window and get on the floor and crawl around. And I personally don't spend a lot of time crawling around on the floor, and so it just feels like an invitation to play and build with blocks and sing songs and read books and whatever is emerging from the babies at that moment. And one of the things I really enjoy about it, and I popped these two pictures in here because they kind of demonstrate this, is the babies have these really specific personalities. And I also don't spend a lot of time with the village babies right now. So when I work in nursery, I get to know them, and I get to know that Isaac likes to read books, and Ezra likes to hide behind the kitchen. And you can see him on the left peeking through the shutters there, and then Isaac joined him, and they started interacting through the window. Or they just act like little old men and sit in the tiny chairs next to each other and just like chill out. And they're hilarious. And all the other babies too, I would not know them as well for their individual, distinct little personalities if I didn't spend an hour with them every once in a while. And so that's been really rich relationally for me.
So I think what I've learned from cooking is that, like, it's okay to not be perfect. Just because, I really struggle with, like, perfectionism and wanting to get it all right, wanting, everybody to, like, be impressed by what I do or whatever, And so, I think, like, that's one of the main things is that, like, actually it is okay if it doesn't turn out perfect, and people will still enjoy the food, and they'll still come up to you and say, hey, Kelsey, you did a great job, even when I'm thinking, oh, I totally failed. So, and in addition to that, like, just sort of the value of community, like I said earlier, just like being able to reach out and say, hey, can you help me? And, people are really willing to help, so.
Give them a hand. I know you didn't want any recognition, but we're giving you a little bit. So here's the thing. Part of the reason we have everybody up here is some of you are new at volunteering. Some of you have been doing it a while, and you're like, I still haven't figured it out. These people haven't figured it out either, but they are actually people you can ask for help and say, hey, like, I'd love to do this, or how do I troubleshoot this? And they know how to negotiate the system or can just give you information that you need. So here are some people to ask for help. All right. Thanks, guys, so much. I really appreciate it. You can leave your chairs here. All right. So, the movement of the Spirit, which was that too. Volunteering is part of that. But so I'm going to have Kevin come up and Jake. I saw Jake here. Where's Jake? He was here. Now he's gone. Oh, there he is. Hi, Jake. Come on up. Sorry. Come on up, Jake. Lane and John Rohe are going to come on up here. It is 1926. That is our address, and not the year. All right. So I asked these people to come up and talk about, over the last year and a half, what God has done in their life in and through the village. And part of the reason I asked that is, for those of you who don't know, in February of last year, really in January, we began the process of saying, okay, God, we don't have any open seats anymore. And God is inviting us to open our community to a larger group of people. And but that's been some strain on our community. But as that happened, God began to move in some really unexpected ways in our church. And so hopefully, these guys are going to share, and depending on the amount of time, I may even open it up a little bit for you guys to share about what God has done and what He's doing in your life. But I'm going to ask it in particular to each person, so I can kind of gear the question to them. Which one of you wants to go first? I'll give you the mic. You got the mic? All right. Go for it. So you're running the mic if people can't hear him. So if you would just talk to us kind of about your journey, John, and where you are spiritually and what God is doing.
Okay. My name is John. I started coming to the village in February of this year. I consider myself a new Christian, and that is, to give you some perspective. About this time last year, anytime I would go through anything in my life, I wouldn't think of God. I wouldn't pray. I wouldn't. It just wouldn't come up. I would go to church for the holidays with my family, but I never really felt a sense of community. So since February, I've been coming to the village. I found the village through my friend Albert. I work with Albert. And it just really opened my eyes to what Eric was saying earlier from Isaiah about Christian comfort. I really felt that coming to the village, and I had never felt that before. It's just being in front of all you guys right now, I think is kind of going along the lines of what the village preaches, and is being vulnerable. And that's something I'm not used to, giving up control and asking God for help when I'm going through problems in my life. So that's how the village has kind of helped me get closer to God in ways I just wasn't expecting. I just can't be more grateful for what, the village has done. I look around and I see like a bunch of close friends that I've traveled with, that I've just recently met, that I've been going to coffee with, that have just helped me build this relationship with God through sharing their experiences, them opening up to me and being vulnerable. So I'm just really grateful, and I'm praying. I'm praying for myself. I'm praying for others. I'm reading the Bible. So it's just a big transformation in my life.
Thanks. We'll just go down the road. Give him a hand, guys. Thank you. Just so it's all good. Kevin.
Yes.
So I think can you just talk about the last 2 years and what God's been doing in your life and in this community, and sort of the transformational pieces, like some of the highlights of that? Nope. You okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's hard to, I just was reflecting this week on, wow, what happened in my life in the last 18 months, and a lot of things, a lot of really good things, and I didn't really have anything to do with any of those things taking place. I don't recall. Probably the most major thing was I walked away from my addiction to alcohol, which was a 6-year battle, and that was about 16 months ago, but I don't remember conquering it. I don't remember facing up against this dragon and saying, okay, I'm going to slay you. It was killed for me, and I had the opportunity to allow that to happen, to surrender to something. I think of Eric's sermon last week on Colossians 3, which says, let the peace of Christ rule in your heart. Allow it. I didn't do anything. It just kind of has swept over me, and I guess I stopped resisting it. That would be some form of action. Yeah.
So 18 months ago, my family was church shopping, and church shopping is terrible. I grew up in a church that was very different than this church. Probably like a lot of churches are very different than this church. The church leadership was very different than this church leadership. We were discouraged from doing something. Whereas here there is space and encouragement to be creative and to be ourselves and to help others with kindness, and it's a very different environment. It's it's just beautiful. And the fact that my wife and I both didn't see eye to eye when church shopping. At one point I was hoping for second best because that would be better than nothing. I would just agree to go to a church that we could both find an agreement, but I wasn't really thinking the village was going to hit a double home run with both of us wanting it at the same time. It felt like it was that impossible. I don't know, but the fact that God truly worked through Heather's life in some really interesting pieces, essentially a series of doors opening and no doors closing, because she didn't. This is so different than what we came from. It wasn't what she expected where we would end up at. But now she really likes it, and it's really awesome. It's just simply it just shows God's hand slowly, graciously moving on us. It's just we've also found a lot of healing for things that we didn't know we needed healing for. I've known Jesus for a long time, but I feel like there was so much depth and so much more relationship that now I feel there's just literally the tip of the iceberg was what I had before, and now there's 90% of this experience that I'm behind now on this long journey, and there's just so much more road to cover. So I'm really glad to be here, and my whole family is just going to be blessed by being here.
So I asked Lane to talk, in particular because she has a unique space in the last year, and that if you didn't know this, Lane, she started the village when she was 19 years old. How old are you now, Lane?
33, guys.
And she, so that's a lot of transition to be 19-year-old college student. She was also the first person we ordained as a missionary to go to South Tucson. And people like Vivi are a reason, Vivi being here and marrying Jesse is partly us sending her, apparently we just sent her out to get Jesse a wife, but anyway. But we ordained her, and there's been a lot of ups and downs, and this particular adventure of being a pastor's wife with all of your peers and friends has been a good and rough transition for you. And I thought if you could talk a little bit about what God has been teaching you in that, and sort of the highs and maybe some of the lows, just things you struggle with, to kind of offer that to everybody.
Well, a lot of you know me, but some of you don't know I grew up Catholic. So the Village was this beautiful place I came to where it was like there was liturgy, but yet there was like a lot of freedom around confession. Like there wasn't the shame around like people knowing your sin, and I think seeing that like play out for my whole life as an adult, really, like when I'm 36, guys, I will have been here just as long as when I was in Indiana. So I'm like, wow, that's crazy. So I think this past year, some of the good and yet some of the hard. I mean, the family I grew up in was like very Catholic and near Notre Dame, which is why I wear Notre Dame stuff sometimes, where just money wasn't a problem. And that's what like all of my family's hope was usually hinged on, is like they could provide for themselves. God was like a fixture in our lives, but he wasn't like super needed. So Mark and I have moved into this place where, you know, like I have student loans from going to college because that's what my family does, guys. But that was just seeing some of the ways we're financially, like, I feel like in the world's eyes, like our life started to crumble a little bit. But God has brought me on this journey, really, like since I've been in Arizona, of trusting, just like Eric was talking about with the giving, like trusting his provision. And it's not something that comes very easily to me. I think just, yeah, like how they had talked about, like giving up control and giving up the like sense of that it should be my competency or it should be my responsibility. Like that's true, sort of, in being a steward, but not on the full level of like earning and making it happen, like cutting God out of the process. So it's really been an adventure with Mark and with all of you. So thank you for being willing to risk with us, because it's a big deal. And it's big for all of us. And for our kids, so there's just one. But kid, singular. So I think that's been really beautiful, but really hard and scary. But it's been really cool to see the ways that God has spoken, and that God, like when this stuff happened with the Free Methodist Church and we weren't sure what we were going to do, like God was just like, wait. And so he's just answered prayers in these really beautiful ways and shown up in really unexpected ones. And so that's been really cool. Yeah, and I think along with that, something he's been like, goes into like my provision. But my sense, I feel like the other thing that he's been talking to me about is like what it means to like lose our lives, you know, like the verse where it talks about when we follow Christ, like we will lose our lives, but we will gain them in the kingdom of God. And so I think God's been teaching me a lot about what it means to kind of chip away my sense of entitlement, of what I think I'm entitled to about my life. Whether it's like, oh, I'm entitled to like, I really hate the heat. For those of you who don't know, I really hate it. I love the snow. And so to be here, it's really sometimes hard for me. A lot of times hard for me. But so like that I'm entitled to live where I want, or I'm entitled to have, you know, like my husband at my disposal when I want, which is not true for any marriage, guys. But being a pastor, to like give our marriage, our home, our family, my husband, to everyone, you know, that he's like God's to use and he's God's to minister with. He's not mine. So I think it's been a lot of like changing my mindset about, what I am entitled to, I feel like. And And I didn't grow up in a home where we had a lot of people over. There's some mental illness with my parents, and my house was a pretty demon-infested place, is an easy way to say it. So our house was like not a warm place to come to. So hospitality was not something I like innately learned. So having people over, and like, I also grew up in the Midwest where it's like, everything has to be perfect and you have a standard when people come over, and like letting go of a lot of that is still really hard for me. And letting go of what I feel like friendship should look like, or the responsibility I feel like I should have for coming through for people. And I think allowing God to take care of us all, relationally, financially, a lot of, like, even for people who are newer, like, I'm like, keep praying for like relationships and friends for people, and the ways I can't come through and do it all myself. And so I feel like Jesus keeps stripping me of a lot of the shoulds, I think, is a huge part of my story. Like, I should come through for people like this, or I should be able to do that. And especially being a pastor's wife, like, I don't stay home with Saoirse all day. Like, Mark and I split childcare, for those of you who don't know. So having a job sometimes is really inconvenient. But God uses it to take care of us. So it's like this continual submission, I think, is the word that God has been putting in my brain a lot. Like, submitting to the community, submitting to, God gave me this job to take care of our family, so that's what I need to do. And practicing letting go of resentment, because resentment is something that's really easy for me to jump to. So continuing to confess that to God and you guys, and to be grateful. So I think that's been a huge part of the journey this year, and being grateful when people show up. Like, shout out to all the people who showed up today for the garden. Thank you for all you did.
Thanks, guys. Give them a hand. Thank you guys so much for sharing. Thank you. We actually have about 10 minutes that is an open time. So if there's anybody, it's turned off. Is there anybody who would like to share along those lines about what God is doing in their life over the last 18 months? We've got Through the Village. We have 10 minutes to do that. Did somebody raise their hand? Kevin, I'll let you. Jake right there. Little Jake wants to say something.
So when I started my first church, as my dad was saying, it was so much different, and it was a complete change when I came here, and I found new people, and I understood things better, and I came to just loving this church and the people here, and it's just been amazing what God's done, and the thing He's done to
Expand my view that way.
So about a little more than a year ago, I kind of had the opportunity to take some classes about basically advocacy for people with disabilities. I don't know if everybody knows, I'm paralyzed from the waist down due to a spinal cord injury that happened a little more than 11 years ago. And since then, I've been kind of trying to figure out, okay, why did this happen to me? Why, what's God doing in it? Why would God let something like that happen? Especially since it only happened like 18 months after I became a believer. And so after I took these classes about advocacy, I kind of, sort of lit a fire in my heart of, okay, this is really what I want to do. You know, I'm kind of sick of just wandering around trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. I think God's finally pointed me in this direction. And so I applied for the Master's of Social Work program at ASU Tucson campus and got in, and just a couple weeks ago started doing it and started doing an internship at a rehabilitation hospital, working with people who've had, traumatic brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, and stroke. And, I feel like God's really leading me in it and showing me, how to walk in this way. There's a verse, you'll hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. And I really feel like God's doing that for me. Roll in it, in my case. And I just wanted to say that that's like something really exciting that God's done in my life over the last year.
So it's been at least 12 years ago, I think, that Lindy and I first came here and fell in love with the village, and it's been a struggle for us to be here. So we've been back and forth, and this year we're actually here, and I just can't tell you what a wonderful answer to prayer and provision on the place of God it is to actually really be part of the community and be present. And so it's just been really awesome. That's kind of thin on content, but that's my heart.
I'm Colleen. Something God has been doing in my life in the last year is Corey actually almost exactly a year ago baptized me. And I don't know a lot of the beliefs around baptism, but something happened that uprooted this false belief that I'm abandoned. And I feel so connected to God and his faithfulness. And in the last year, he's taken a lot from me, and I'm not abandoned. And it's been really powerful to believe and to feel, because I don't know where Mark is, but I really resonated with his sermon on Esther. It was so good, and I am Esther. I could name 1,000 stories of how God's abandoned me, and I feel God rooting me in Scripture and the truth that he doesn't, and he hasn't, and his stories and Jesus' stories are my stories. And it's just really beautiful, and I don't feel like I have the gift of faith, and I've been asking him for faith, and I feel like he's just abundantly given it. And so I'm doing things that I don't want to do, that God's calling me to do, and I'm boldly stepping into it because I know he's not going to abandon me.
Amen. Time for one more, if anybody wants to say anything.